It's time to explore the world according to Glenn. I'm Kevin Jacobsen. Glenn Close is my favorite actress, and this show is all about exploring the career of one of the finest actors of her generation. Each episode, I'll be joined by a guest as we dive into one of Glenn's movies, TV shows, or stage productions, going chronologically through her career, discussing her performance, and assessing the project itself. And today, we're talking Glenn's performance in the beloved Hallmark Hall of Fame TV movie, Sarah Plain and Tall.
Eight-time nominee Glenn Close, motherfuckers.
My guest today is one of the sharpest writers and podcasters in our space, I would say. She has joined me many times on various podcasts, including 2 Best Actress episodes, talking 1960 Best Actress and 2017, which was super fun. From Citizen Dame, The Watch and Talk, and Awards Watch, welcome to the show, Karen Peterson.
Well, that was quite an introduction, Kevin. Thank you.
Well, I at least owed you that from how many times we've talked together and really enjoyed our conversations. So
I love being here, and every time you ask me back, I'm always a little surprised that you still want to talk to me, but I love it. So
Why?
I don't know,
Let's
because
unpack
I
that.
listen to your show and I hear the other people that you get, and I'm just like, why does he want to talk to me? I don't know what I'm doing.
Oh, come on. Don't be so humble. You're one of the best. So,
Oh, well, thank you very much.
yes. But before we talk what we're talking about today, Sarah Plain and Tall, I'm really curious about your relationship with Glenn Close overall. If you remember when you first saw her, and if you have a favorite performance of hers.
Well, I will tell you one thing about Glenn Close is that I got to play with her dog a
Excuse
couple
me?
years ago. I did.
Pip?
Yes, I
Wow.
did. I got to
Wow.
play with Pip. It was at the Spirit Awards. She was, because that year she was bringing her dog everywhere. He's the
Yes.
sweetest little Havanese. He's so cute. And he has his own Instagram account.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, I was covering the Spirit Awards, so I was there when she won for the wife, and she was up, at the front answering questions in the press room, and she just let him run around. I was in like the second row. He came right to me and my friend and just wanted to hang out with us, and he was just the sweetest thing.
Wow.
So
I'm so happy for you and not at all jealous.
yeah, so I think about that a lot. I actually still have a picture on my phone. I'm just like, oh,
Oh.
just love this little dog. He's so cute. Glenn was
Wow.
amazing too, but
Yeah.
not too many people can say that they got to hang out with her dog.
Yes.
So, but prior to that, it's funny because I've been really thinking about this, and I actually cannot remember a time that I didn't know about Glenn Close. She's just kind of always existed
Mm-hmm.
to me, and I grew up in the 80s, so she was very much, obviously, because you've been covering this, but I mean, she got her start early in the 80s and was just becoming more and more of a presence throughout. And so I didn't see any of her movies until I think the first one I saw was Hamlet, actually.
Wow.
Yeah, but I remember my parents being really big on The Natural. They loved The Big Chill. Um, Definitely Fatal Attraction was something that I was very aware of. I remember the commercials for for that movie being on TV. But yeah, the first Glenn Close performance that I really think that I saw was Hamlet. And it was funny because I was listening to your Hamlet episode and I was laughing because I was just like, oh my gosh, this sounds like me. I was such a weirdo Shakespeare nerd.
Oh, wow.
And in eighth grade, my school did a Renaissance fair, and I was in this little. We did a couple of scenes from Hamlet, and I was in this for some reason in eighth grade. And
Wow.
so the movie came out, and I was like, I've got to go see that. And my mom was like, "You are so weird. Why do you want to see this movie?" But I went, and I loved it, and I thought it was great.
Was the Mel Gibson as Hamlet part of the appeal too?
At the time, it probably was.
At the time, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I love that. Great little origin story there. Do you have a favorite performance of hers over the years?
Oh man, there are so many. I know everyone's talked to. Actually, Dangerous Liaisons was the first DVD I ever owned. I love her in that. I
Wow.
love Fatal Attraction. I really love The Paper.
Mm-hmm.
I think she's so great in that. I haven't watched that film in a while. I need to revisit it, but I really love that role. Yeah, I mean, she's great in everything. You know how
Let's be
this is.
real. Yes. You don't have to tell me. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Ugh.
I have a question for you, actually.
Oh my goodness. Turning the
I do,
tables.
yeah. I
Okay.
am, yeah. So if Glenn were to hear about this podcast and
Oh
and
God. Yes.
want to join, what movie would you want to talk to her most about?
That's an interesting question. Wow. I haven't actually thought about that for like a specific movie. Like, I've thought about if she were to find out about it, like, would we just kind of do like a broad career thing? But for a movie, I mean, my personal favorite has always been Dangerous Liaisons. So I think she'd have a lot to say about that. That was a big time in her life too, where she had just given birth to her daughter, Annie, who is the young wife in The Wife. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, I think she would have a lot to say about that role. And she's talked to death about Fatal Attraction. I don't really need to indulge with her further on that because I feel like I know exactly what she would say. But Dangerous Liaisons, there's so much going on there that would be
I
so
love it.
juicy. Yeah.
Love it.
Or maybe The Wife, also to get into like the award season of it all too. Not to get
Yeah.
too uncomfortable, but you know how things ended up. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I think she would have a lot of interesting things to say about that awards here.
yes, I think so too. Okay, well, on that note, let us travel back to 1991, simpler times, to talk about Glenn and how she got involved in Sarah Plain and Tall. So, this was actually one of the first instances of Glenn shepherding a project from the ground up. She had been in the film industry now for just about 10 years. She had gotten 5 Oscar nominations. She was a box office star. She was well liked in the industry, and she kind of had the clout at this point in these sort of post Fatal Attraction years to make things happen for her with a level of power that she hadn't had before. So she was asked to record the audiobook for Sarah Plain and Tall, which was a children's book by Patricia MacLachlan, and Glenn found herself very moved by the story and felt like it would make for a great movie. So she went and contacted the author herself and hoped to maybe secure the rights. And she had actually turned down many offers in the past to adapt her story before, but she ended up feeling a real connection with Glenn. So I found this sweet quote from her, Patricia MacLachlan, from the LA Times. She said, "I put on earphones, and at the end of the first chapter, I burst into tears, which was absolutely involuntary. Glenn breathed such life into my characters. They became real." So that was
Aw.
very sweet. Yes. But she really, really trusted Glenn to kind of adapt her story with care. And Glenn had recently started her production company, Trillium Productions, with Sarah Plain and Tall serving as her first executive producer credit in her career. So another big milestone moment here. And bear in mind, this was also only a few years after the birth of her daughter, Annie, and it was kind of important to her to take on more family friendly stories. Because also in that same LA Times article, Glenn said, "Having a daughter, I think very hard, and I'm very careful about the kind of characters I choose to portray now." So that was kind of partly motivating her as well. And so the production took place in Nebraska, and this is a TV movie presented by Hallmark Hall of Fame that takes place in 1910 and tells the story of a widower named Jacob, played by Christopher Walken, who has 2 young children, Anna and Caleb. They live on a farm together in Kansas and are grieving the death of Jacob's wife and their children's mother, Catherine, who died 6 years ago, giving birth to Caleb. So Jacob ultimately decides to put an ad for a mail order bride in the newspaper to help take care of the children. And that's where Sarah Wheaton, played by Glenn, enters the picture. She is kind of a headstrong woman from Maine who wishes to find some agency in her life and answers that ad. She travels to Kansas, and the story explores how Sarah integrates into the Whitting family, helping Jacob and the kids work through some of their grief and adapting to life on the farm. So, with all of that, let us discuss Sarah Plain and Tall. I actually had posted on social media that I had gotten the DVD from the library this past week, and so many people were replying saying that they have such fond memories of seeing this back in the day. So I'm very curious whether that was true of you as well, Karen, and what your relationship is with this movie and Glenn's performance.
Yeah. So back well, I guess throughout the 90s, but especially in the early 90s, we didn't have streaming services, back in my day.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have all of these choices. You had network TV. That was what was on. Maybe you had cable. My family did not have cable. And ABC had the wonderful world of Disney, and NBC usually had some like really weird movie of the week. And then CBS was the home of Hallmark Hall of Fame, and they were always these really sweet, sometimes a little too sweet, saccharine.
Corny,
Yes, very,
Yeah.
but not always.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because when you asked me to do this episode, I thought, oh wow, I actually get to do one where Glenn won some awards, because my memory is that she won the Emmy for this. And then when I was
Hmm.
researching, I was like, wait, what? Because I just remember hearing
That's so
so much
funny.
about this at the time. I saw it when it was on, and I really liked this movie. I thought it was very, very sweet without being corny, without being overly too much. And I think a lot of that has to do with Glenn and also Christopher Walken. But yeah, I also have fond memories of this. And when you had mentioned that you got it at the library, I was like, oh wait, I didn't think to check the library. And I was so delighted because apparently LA County has 6 copies of it somewhere
Oh.
floating around the collection, and 2 of them are currently checked out.
Hmm.
And it just made me so happy.
That's so sweet. Yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe they're following along with this show. Who knows?
maybe they are.
Yeah. So, for me, this was one of my first introductions to Glenn as a kid, actually. I will admit, 101 Dalmatians maybe resonated a little more with me because
Yeah.
I was just the right age for that. But I actually remember my grandma having Sarah Plain and Tall on VHS. It was prominently displayed in her home. She loved it so much, plus the sequels. She really just loved the whole trilogy. So, of course, she showed it to me. At the very least, I saw the first one. I don't really remember a lot about the sequels, but yeah, I think I really liked it at the time. It was a very long time ago, so hard to remember. But it felt to me like tied with like something like Mary Poppins, where it was just
Yeah.
like this fun, like high spirited woman comes in and helps out a family. But this is obviously much more down to earth and grounded and, all those things. But this is also where I can maybe indulge some of my own origin story, which is that Glenn, for me, when she takes on roles like this, reminds me so much of my grandmother. And, when I think back on that time with her, she died a few years ago, but, there was so much warmth, but also like a kind of stubbornness too, and like a strength there. Like she was not a wilting flower by any means. I still remember the day when I was like acting up and she called me a little shit. but but yeah, like she really kind of took charge. She was on all these committees and everything. Like she really cared very deeply about things, but also had a lot of kindness too. And, we had a great relationship. But yeah, watching this again for the first time in 25 years, maybe, really, really brought me back to, being at her house and watching movies like this and those other kind of like family friendly movies of that time, much simpler time, like I said. And yeah, I feel like I also wouldn't have such a powerful kind of sense memory of it if the film itself didn't have that kind of warmth and that nostalgic glow and I find that even though it's maybe not the biggest production necessarily, it's not overly showy on a technical level. I just think the atmosphere of it is really just so transporting for me. Like there is just a simplicity there and an authenticity in the production design and the houses and the church and the costumes, the dresses. It's just so well appointed, I think, that even if the story maybe has its formulaic moments to it, it also just flows so naturally. It just kind of all works together. And I can see why Patricia MacLachlan was so pleased with Glenn's kind of like take on it too. There are moments here and there that can get a little contrived towards the end perhaps, but there's just a lot of respect for the story here that I found really resonated, certainly much more on a thematic level about grief and all these things that I probably ever picked up on as a kid. And yeah, I still found myself pretty moved. I don't know about you, but it really was just like, this held up better than I expected it would.
Yeah, that was my experience too. I actually read the book this week as well because I wanted
Oh,
to see how it compared, and
hmm.
it's interesting. I mean, the book is only, I don't know, 50 pages or so.
Yeah, it's like a
It's a
children's book, right?
it's a children's book. It's
Yeah,
a young reader's chapter book.
right.
And the translation from page to screen is actually pretty exact. A lot of the dialogue comes right from the book. The content of the letters when Sarah and Jacob are first writing back and forth to each other, it's word for word exactly the letters from the book,
Hmm.
but it is done in a way that feels real. It doesn't feel like, oh, we weren't sure how to write this, so we're just going to borrow. Sometimes adaptations just kind of will do that, and it feels
Yeah.
like a copy instead of like an adaptation. And I think they did such a lovely job of translating that in a way that just really makes you feel like the story is coming to life and just kind of expanding on the world a little bit. Because obviously, this is a 2 hour movie, and so there are things that happen in the movie that weren't from the book, but it doesn't feel like filler. It feels like we're just expanding on this world a little bit and showing some things like the storm that happens late in the story. It does happen in the book, but it's a little bit different and in ways that just really kind of immerse you in this world instead of just feeling like it's just trying to, it doesn't feel like fluff, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's a lovely expansion. I mean, I haven't actually read the book myself, but it feels just again natural, and it feels like it's just kind of expanding upon the world of what Patricia kind of envisioned for this story, which I think it's told from the perspective of the kids, correct? Yes.
It's first person from Anna's perspective.
Okay.
So it's
Yeah.
Anna telling this story about when
Mhm.
Sarah came to to visit them. And it really it's interesting because of the fact that it's from the child's point of view, and not only that, but the older child, the one who remembers her mother. You really get that sadness. You really feel that, not trepidation, but a little bit of anxiety over this new person coming, and there's sort of this, and I think this really is portrayed lovely in a very lovely way in the story, in the movie too. But Anna really wants to connect with Sarah. She really wants Sarah to feel welcome there, but she's also still got those memories of her mother. And she's a little bit afraid of losing that, but she's also just really afraid that anything they do might send Sarah away. And then in a way, she'll lose two mothers. And that's a lot for a kid, she's 9. And that is
Mhm.
so much for her. And she's also basically been the woman of the house since she was 3 years old. And instead of feeling like it's corny, we keep using that word, or also too dour,
Right.
it doesn't feel like that. It feels, you get that weight of her emotion, but you also get that sense of hope. And I think there's more of a focus on the hope. And I really like that.
Yeah, that's a very tricky line because it is dealing with like these very heavy themes. Also, these almost like themes that would be covered in ordinary people, essentially, like
Mm-hmm.
about grief. And, we also have Jacob, the Christopher Walken character, and he's really struggling to even adapt to this situation, even though he helped set it in motion. He's still very trepidatious himself. So, it's really heavy stuff, but definitely treated in a family friendly way. It's so interesting that this story that is kind of about the grief of losing a mother is also so like something that so many people treasure from their childhood, and that they are able to kind of understand things and the way it unpacks things in a very child friendly way without it being too condescending, I guess. So, yeah.
I think because of the fact that we didn't go through the loss of their mother with them, because by the time the story picks up, it's already been 6 years. We never met her. They didn't cast anybody to play her. I guess maybe in a picture, but we don't go through that with them. We don't see that experience. And so because of that, this loss can we can kind of substitute our own experiences because everybody's gone through some sort of loss. And so we can kind of interchange our grief for whatever it may be with theirs, and I think on that level it becomes really relatable and kind of universal. And I think this is one thing where the movie can get into things that the book doesn't, because it doesn't just stay on Anna's perspective. We actually spend time just with Sarah, just with Jacob, with just Sarah and Jacob without the kids around, and really getting into their their emotions and their thoughts on what's happening and what they're thinking about doing. And I think that that's part of why this feels like it's for the whole family and not just a sweet kids movie that was on TV. It really does feel like there's kind of something for everyone in this story.
Yeah, four quadrants,
Yeah.
as we say today. Yeah, and before we get too further into the story, I just wanted to mention my own thoughts about Glenn's performance, too, which is that, I know it's not the villainous persona that we all love to see from her, but for me, this is like the peak of her like Earth Mother roles that she had a lot in those early years of her career. This is the ultimate, like, this is like the mother you would want, or if you kind of continue the Mary Poppins analogy, like the nanny you would want. You get a sense from Glenn how even having a young daughter herself has changed her a little bit and softened her and just made her more patient and maternal and able to have this kind of chemistry with the child actors too, while still keeping the confidence that we love to see from her. And there is just a real emotional intelligence and a sensitivity in how she plays Sarah. So I think I just appreciate that this is a story about how this woman comes in and transforms this grieving family's life, but we also are delving pretty significantly into her story as well. And we can sort of infer from her like the way that she carries herself with this kind of practicality and smarts, that she is a well-read woman and very intelligent and has that classic New England sort of frankness too, and that she, spent a great deal of her younger years, now into her 40s, probably caring for other people and not really centering her own feelings and her own life as much, which is why she feels this call to action to go out there and kind of forge her own path. And I just think that very adventurous, lust for life kind of sensibility I find to be really contagious, and I think she just takes to it right away.
Yeah. It's interesting because there were some things about this that I really resonated with, as myself being a woman in my 40s, single, never married, and kind of always the one that's taking care of other people. And it's funny because when this would have come out in 91, I was still a kid. I was, in high school, but I was still a kid. I had a stepmother. My mom is very much still with me, so I didn't lose my mom, but I had a stepmother, and had gone through the process of welcoming this new person into my family, into my life. And so I think when I would have first seen this, I'm sure that that's something that I would have really been thinking about is, my own relationship with my stepmother, which is a good one. And then now as an adult who's lived my life and looking back on things, and I've been in relationships where kids were involved, and so now I can watch this movie from that side. And I fully agree with you that watching Glenn navigate the emotions involved and sort of coming into this just, being her headstrong self, but also having enough of that, um, not humility, sure, but there's something else. I'm not quite sure what it is, but just being able to come into the situation and recognize that there are things that she does not know and things that she does not understand, and being willing to just say, I'm going to learn this. I'm going to learn how to farm. I'm going to learn how to drive a wagon. All these
Mhm.
things that she's just willing to do. And Glenn is such a gifted performer that she can go from movies like Fatal Attraction and Dangerous Liaisons to a role like this, and it feels natural, it feels believable. You forget about those other parts while you're watching her as Sarah, because she just really embraces those qualities and that sort of that gumption that she's got, but also this love. She's filled with love. Her life has been about serving people, being there for people. She's full of love for people and animals. Animals are really important to her too, and you believe her. You just follow her into this role just without question, because you believe that she believes this, and she
Yes.
believes who she is, and it just makes it very easy to follow her along and watch her sink into this in such a
Yeah.
beautiful way.
Mm-hmm. And I think again you can see why she had spent probably quite a few, or maybe 1 or 2 years, sinking into the role because she was part of it from the ground up, you
Yeah.
know. So she lived with Sarah in that way. Plus, like I said, having a small child at the time, I think all of that really helps. But yeah, I just think
Yeah.
it's interesting watching her, even in the way that she describes herself as plain and tall. There is that humbleness there and that humility, and maybe that kind of like slight vulnerability of feeling like she is not the prettiest person necessarily, but that she is very reliable. It's just an interesting little, like, you want to delve a little bit into her background more, like she really fills in the backstory very well, even if we don't delve into it too much beyond what she tells the kids about living in
Mhm.
Maine. And I just think the sort of difficulty that Anna is facing too in that relationship is very realistically portrayed, especially when Anna's revealing her feelings to her father, being like, she's a stranger. She's not going to be my new mother, essentially. And especially when she says things like, I don't remember what mama looked like. Like that's really tough. And I think
Yeah.
that I don't remember the actress's name, but I think she does a really phenomenal job, and she's very emotionally vulnerable. I mean, the other kid, Caleb, he's cute. He's fun. I like him. I like the fact that, just to go on to that tangent, he just fully accepts Sarah immediately. And I'm just like, that would be me, you know? That would be me being like, oh, Glenn Close is my new mommy? Okay, let's have fun and sing along with her. But of course, he
Yeah.
doesn't have any memory of his mother, so he never had that before. But yeah, again, I think the kid actors really help it well.
Lexi Randall is who
There
plays
we go.
Anna,
Yeah.
and yeah, they actually they did two more of these films over the course of the 90s, which I'm sure you'll talk about.
Hmm.
But the kids stayed with it the whole time. So
I love that.
yeah. But yeah, one of the things that I think, I mean, you just talked about Caleb has no memory of his mother. She died the day after he was born, so he's never grown up with any real motherly figure. The closest they have is a neighbor. Um, for Anna, it's different. She does remember. She was very young, but she does remember her mother. And she's also just grown up in this world where she's basically had to be the mother to her little brother. And she, like I said, she's had to be the woman of the house. And she's a headstrong kid. She's tough. She's from the prairie. She's growing up on a farm. And so I mean, she is no wilting flower.
Mm.
And so I think for Sarah to come along and be so much like her, the two of them actually have so much in common, that I think that that's part of why they're able to build a relationship, because Anna is able to, I think, I think eventually
Mhm.
she'd really be able to see that Sarah's not going to try to change her. Sarah's not going to try to change who Anna is or make her do things she doesn't want to do. That Sarah is someone who will actually help her grow into the person that she's already on her way to becoming. And
Yeah.
I really like that.
Even if that means sometimes doing things that her father doesn't always approve of,
Hmm.
such as actually allowing the kids to like have their mother's old things that Jacob has just like stashed away or thrown out.
Yeah.
I think that is again very realistically portrayed, and I think it's a really great performance too from Christopher Walken, who at first you're like, okay, this is like Christopher Walken doing his thing, and he still has that same voice. Um,
Hmm.
I remember clocking early on just one of his line readings talking about how like I put an advertisement in the paper, and I'm like,
Yeah.
man, okay, but yeah, he doesn't always make for the most convincing, like, Kansas native necessarily, but I think as a kind of depiction of someone who's really struggling to access their emotions, that part of it he really, really nails. So I think he gets so many great scenes with Glenn, and they have really sweet, again, very sensitive kind of chemistry, the two of them, even if they seem so worlds apart. And I think it's a really lovely moment in his performance. This one scene where Jacob is kind of walking up on Sarah and the kids singing on the porch. And he kind of just looks at them and is just taking it all in. And it's like a little bit of that old feeling about his wife. Those feelings are coming to the surface because his wife always sang with Anna. And he kind of tears up a little bit in that moment. Very, very sensitive piece of acting from him.
Yeah, it's funny because you had talked about Mary Poppins. I was thinking a lot about The Sound of Music, so I guess we both had
Oh
Julie
yeah.
Andrews on the brain. But yeah, this idea that this father, he lost his wife, he's now stuck with these kids on his own, and he doesn't know how to raise them.
Hmm.
And he's been doing the best he can, but one of the things that he cut out of his life, he did not force the children not to, but he cut music out of his life because that's something that is really difficult for him. It's something that connected him to his wife, and he just kind of, for him, it's easier to deal with his emotions by not dealing with them, by burying them, by pretending they aren't there. And doing that means hiding, putting away anything that will make him feel anything or think about his wife, which there's a lovely scene that we'll talk about, I'm sure, soon, between him and Sarah, where he really gets into why he feels the way that he does and the guilt that he has. And I
Hmm.
think that even though that is not in the book at all, I think that that scene is kind of necessary because it gives you a little bit more of that insight in a really interesting way of why he would deprive his children of the memories of their mother too. And it's really not because he doesn't want them to have them, it's because he cannot handle it. And I think Christopher Walken does, yeah, he does a really good job of having this. He's not mean about it. It's just there's like he doesn't want to be vulnerable. He doesn't want to reveal that, not weakness, but he doesn't want to feel it. He doesn't want to deal with his feelings.
Yeah.
And
It's too
in
hard.
1910, in the middle
Right.
of the country, nobody would expect him to deal with his feelings. But I agree with you. That scene where he comes up, and this is after Caleb had already asked a lot of questions early on about music and
Hmm.
wanting to know if Sarah would sing and things, and she said yes in one of her letters. So he doesn't question it. He just immediately just walks up and joins them, and there's this really sweet look that Glenn has when he kind of sings a line of a song, and it's sort of this triumph, but in a way that's just very like, okay, I think this is gonna work. And it's
Yeah.
kind of subtle, but it's really, really sweet.
Yeah. And I think she realizes that he is going to have his walls up and it's not going to be easy
Yeah.
for her to bring those down, but she knows that I think he's capable of that. So
Hmm.
there's a lot of trust and patience there too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it leads to this really small exchange that I took note of, even if it's not the biggest scene necessarily, but it's like they're walking late at night, I think, together, and they're kind of agreeing with each other that, like, I really want this to work. But what's unsaid between them is that he's still struggling with this, and she sees him struggling, and she knows that she can't measure up to his memory of his wife, but she's going to be herself. She's not going to be a replacement for her, but still be kind of a mother figure in her own way. I think the film is kind of filled with those small little exchanges, and those, even those silent moments, I think are very powerful, honestly. They
Hmm.
say a lot without saying much of anything.
Yeah.
So I love that, and I love the also scene after that where Anna is crying in bed, which is so heartbreaking because those old feelings of grief are coming back to the surface in that moment. Possibly because I think there's a conversation she had with Sarah earlier in the day where Sarah is talking about her own grief. But yeah, Glenn just provides such warmth and is just like this quiet pillar of strength in a way for Anna, and just letting her cry on her shoulder and reassuring her. I mean, like, we've seen obviously these kinds of stories and scenes like this plenty of times, but for one reason or another, it just is moving because it is so credibly performed by the both of them that it ends up being moving, even if there's a formula to this, if you know what I'm saying.
I do know what you're saying. Yeah. And I think there's just so much, it just feels really natural. None of this feels like it's unrealistic. It just feels very much like, yeah, this is the conversation that would happen. And in that moment for Sarah talking and, hearing, not just talking to Anna and trying to calm her down, but really hearing what she's saying and realizing that her biggest fear in all of this is that she's afraid she's going to completely lose her mother. She's going to lose all of her memories because her father has done nothing to help preserve them.
Yeah.
And Sarah, at that point, I think, is really feeling that pull with Anna of like, I need to help this child. Like, I really care about her and I need to help her. And she knows what she needs to do to help her, and she's not going to let Jacob tell her no. And I think that Anna really needs that too.
Yeah. And that leads to a really great scene, I think, with Glenn and Christopher Walken, of Jacob really putting his foot down when Sarah goes to him and is like, it's wrong to deprive the children of the memory of their mother, which she now is realizing is happening because, yeah, Sarah heard from Anna that her father basically stashed away all of her mother's old things, and it becomes a real source of like conflict in a story that doesn't always have those kind of volatile scenes. It is a very simple, almost slice of life story at times. But that scene at night where she is like finding some of Catherine's old things and decides to defy him in a way by hanging the pictures on the wall. I mean, first of all, I think Glenn plays that exactly right because she is not wilting under his putting his foot down, but there is also a bit of like stubborn frustration and a tiny bit of fear too about what he may do if she goes up against him. But also, I think her sort of forthright quality in wanting what's best for the children really follows so naturally into her decision to go about hanging the pictures without his approval. And she knows, once again, she knows that he will eventually come around to feeling that she's right.
Yeah. Oh, there was a line, I didn't write it down. Now I can't quite remember what it was, but
Hmm.
basically it was something about Sarah being stubborn, or Jacob saying that she was stubborn, and she says something like, "And you're not."
Right. Yeah.
And like they both are very stubborn people, and they kind of have to out stubborn each other. And what I like too in that sequence, I guess, when she does put up the pictures and Jacob sees this and it's not what he wanted. He tried to stop that from happening. He tried to lock those memories away. But sometimes when somebody is dealing with something really emotional, having somebody else just come in and take care of it for them and just make the decision for them, even if it's what they don't think they want, it actually is exactly what they need. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's what we see here. And yeah, I think that there's just this very gentle way that Glenn does all of this. She's stubborn, but in a really delicate, compassionate way.
Right. She is catching flies with honey and not vinegar, I think, is kind of
Hmm.
like her
Yeah,
approach. You know,
yeah.
she's trying to do it in a way that will, like, she's adaptable, I think, is what I'm
Hmm.
trying to say. So
Yeah.
anyway,
There
to
was
go back to,
another.
yeah,
Oh,
go
sorry.
ahead.
Well, I was
No,
going to say,
go.
just kind of in all of this too, there's another line where Anna is talking to Sarah and she says, "Mama did everything Papa wanted." And I think
Mm,
that that's really kind of a key to sort of some of the butting of heads between Jacob and Sarah is that he's not used to a headstrong woman who's going to not just defy him, but just push back on what he says and not just do what he says because he said do it.
right.
And yeah, I like that too.
Right. That is a very good piece of writing there. Really fills things in. And
Mm.
to go back to the just like this being a nice hangout movie too, I just really like the moments of Sarah just playing with the kids like in the pond and splashing around and her teaching them how to float, or all of them including Jacob going out and like pretending that these big hay bales are like dunes that they can slide down, which Sarah had told them about the dunes in Maine, and they go out at night and slide down these hay bales, and you're really seeing Anna's walls come down too in that moment, and Jacob's very slowly coming down as well. Like I said, Caleb's all in from the beginning.
Yeah.
Most relatable character in the movie, just being like, "Yay, I get to hang out with Glenn and sing." Um, but
Yeah.
I just appreciate when films like this can sort of just make room for those easygoing scenes that don't overtly advance the plot, quote unquote, but they are also establishing how how they are bonding together as a family at this point, you know?
Hmm. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And I think when it comes down to it, this is just a movie about, this family who really needs a new they need that breath of fresh air. They need some new life in their family. And then a woman who just needs something different because her life has always been kind of the same. And she just needs something new. And can they make that work? Can they make these two different worlds come together in a way that they can all live with? That's really what this story is. And
mhm.
it's not really deeper than that. It's not bigger than that. And I think that they do a really good job of not trying to make it bigger, not trying to make it super dramatic. If they had added, like, there's sort of this hint of this neighbor who comes around and is a little interested when he meets Sarah and stuff. If they
Mhm.
had turned that more into a love triangle or something silly, then this would have just been ridiculous. It would have really
Yeah.
lost the point of what this is all about in the first place.
Yeah, I agree. There is, though, a big kind of cinematic moment towards the end of the huge windstorm. I will say
Hmm.
that, which
Yes.
was just when like she loses her cat Seal, and I think that is actually like really well filmed. Like it looks pretty visceral and real. It feels very cinematic to me, and all practical effects. I was watching the little behind the scenes about it, and yeah, she, I think also in that moment, Sarah makes a bit of an oopsie where she says in front of Anna that she never should have come here, which obviously strikes a nerve. But yeah, the barn is totally demolished in the storm, and that leads to another conflict between her and Jacob, and he's once again shutting her down and closing off his emotions, even refusing her money to help him rebuild. And I think that's a really great scene for Glenn where we're seeing a little bit more of that like active obstinance that she can have sometimes in her roles of being like, you can't take anything from anyone. There's no room in your heart. And, is coming to realize that maybe it's not going to work out, that he just can't get past his feelings and he can't open up. And that's part of what leads me to like that comparison of like ordinary people, of being
Mhm.
like, the Mary Tyler Moore character there, how she can't get past her grief and it's easier to just bury it and close herself off even from people who love her and have her best interests at heart, like even her own children. And in this case, for him, towards Sarah, even though she has shown him nothing but kindness and generosity, you know?
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting because when I look at this story, I think particularly in the movie version of it, because again, the book is all from Anna's perspective, so you don't really get Sarah's point of view. But I feel like Sarah came to this family fully expecting that this is where I'm going to live now. I'm going to this like this is going to work. This is going to be fine. I think she kind of showed up all in. And it's interesting because, as you pointed out, Jacob was the one who initiated all this by putting the ad in the paper in the first place and inviting her to come and deciding that he wanted to go down this road. And as soon as this is starting to happen, that's when he kind of closes off even more. He's the one who is putting, keeping those walls firmly in place. And I think that, yeah, that sequence with the barn, with the storm, which is much bigger than it is in the book. The book is just kind of like, oh yeah, one of the fields got a little bit messed up, and then
Well,
everything was fine. Yeah, obviously for the movie, you do need something a little bit more dramatic than that. And when
yeah,
they walk out after the storm and they see just everything's just kind of destroyed, not everything, but a lot of things are just destroyed. There's going to be a lot of work cleaning this farm up. And yeah, and this coming after, yeah, sorry, I'm kind of jumping around a little bit here,
it's okay.
but yeah, Sarah, never having experienced a storm like this before, she's terrified, and she does say something that she doesn't mean. Because I don't think that there was any part of her that really meant I should never have come here. I think that's just what she said in the moment, and she wasn't thinking. But words have consequences, and that could have been just as damaging as this storm if she
Hmm.
hadn't immediately tried to kind of repair that damage and recognize that she kind of went a little too far in her outburst.
Right. And I appreciate that the film isn't afraid to depict these as, even though we like everyone here, everyone involved, they are flawed people. They are
Hmm.
complex. So
Yeah.
I think that's part of what people responded to as well. I did also want to talk about another big sequence towards the end, which is his neighbor, Jacob's neighbor, Matthew, and his wife, Maggie, also having a baby, and there could be complications. This is the part where I was mentioning earlier where I felt like tiny bit contrived. The fact that, like, he's kind of reliving a little bit of what happened to his own wife. Obviously, this is important for him to eventually accepting and, moving forward a little bit too. But just functionally, it felt a little bit like tacked on for a climactic moment. I think this was not part of the book. Correct me if I'm
No, it
wrong.
was not at all.
Yeah, right. So definitely a mix of emotion, and the baby ends up being fine. Mother's fine, but it leads to that beautiful opening up moment for Jacob where he's delving into the difficult childbirth for his wife when she had Anna, and how they kind of were urged to not have any more, but they did anyway. And he's kind of carrying some guilt around with him and even blames himself for her death. And then him finally talking about it is allowing him to really process and go to his wife's gravesite. And I think that is a very moving sequence for Christopher Walken that he really nails. And again, it's like, it's such a big moment, but it's so understated too. He really is keeping within the context of how this man would probably be opening up in a realistic way, because he hasn't done this before, probably with anyone. So he is kind of like piecemeal delivering this monologue, and I think it's just beautifully performed.
Yeah, yeah. I think so. Starting with when they get called to Maggie and Matthew's farm, because of Maggie being in this emergency, I think it's interesting because, we see a lot of movies do this where there's some like emergency childbirth situation, and this
Yeah.
woman comes in and just is able to kind of take care of everything. Men, get out of here. I've got this. I think it's interesting that this movie, even though I completely agree with you, that scene is very contrived. It's interesting because Sarah doesn't just come in and know what to do and just handle it and everything's
Yeah.
fine. It ends up being fine, but she's scared. She doesn't know what to do either. And so I think that's an interesting choice, because I think for Sarah, there's certain moments along the way where she's kind of realizing that this prairie life is very different from what she's used to. And I think this is just another example of that, of like out here, like help is really far away. And sometimes you just have to figure things out. So I like that. But then yeah, I think it leads into this really beautiful moment. And, for Jacob, and I think it is very well performed by Christopher Walken. It's heartbreaking when he's talking about his feelings and he finally says out loud the thing that he has never said out loud to anybody about his guilt over losing his wife, and that he feels like it's his fault. And one of the things I think is so beautiful about Jacob as a character is that he never blamed or punished his children for that. He only
True.
blamed himself. And he really loves his kids. And if he had listened to the doctors, Caleb wouldn't exist and his wife would still be there. But he doesn't blame Caleb for that. And I like that the way that Walken portrays that, you just really feel that grief, agony, sadness in him, and not really anger. And I think that that's such
Mm.
an interesting bit to hold back on, because I think anger is such an expected and kind of obvious choice when you're letting all these emotions out, and he really holds back on that. And I think it's really a wise choice from him.
Yeah, it is a beautifully restrained performance from him, which we don't always get from Christopher Walken,
No.
you know?
Yeah.
But I think the end is really sweet too. I do love the little fake out moment at the end where Sarah goes into town after telling the kids, like, hey, take care of my cat for me. And Anna kind of panics because she thinks she's leaving forever. So that, of course, spurs Jacob to go into town and sees her standing there at the train station. It's a classic, like, cinematic romantic drama trope,
Yeah.
but why lie? It works for me every time.
Yeah.
And yeah, she tells him, she was just going there to return her one-way ticket back to Maine, and they have a lovely little kiss, and it goes into a flash forward of the two of them marrying.
Hmm.
I think it's sweet. It's a nice little
Yeah.
uplift. Yeah,
Yeah. I agree. I
it's
mean,
earned.
they really build it up because you have Anna. She at some point found out about this one-way ticket that Sarah bought as soon as she got off the train. She bought a one-way ticket home, and she's
Yeah.
just had it in her drawer, and Anna knows that it's there. And so when Sarah takes off, oh, I'm gonna go ride the wagon. I'll be back
Hmm.
later. And yeah, it's so when Anna runs in, sees that the ticket's missing, and she's just desperately freaking out, and she like tells her dad, "Go get her." And so yeah, I like that scene, even though that's not how it plays out in the book, and that's fine. These are very different,
Sure.
these are different things,
Yeah.
And so what I like about the way that the movie ends is that you really do get that sense of they're not just choosing to get married because it's going to be good for all of them and it's going to be convenient and it's going to help him out and it's going to be, a new adventure for her. By that point, you get the sense that like these two people are falling in love and this is going to be their happily ever after and they have found each other. And it's just that I think that's why it works.
Yeah.
They sell it, you believe it, and you want it.
Yeah, it's earned, I
Mhm.
think. And you see it in the little exchanges they have throughout the movie, that possibility of something more. And
Yeah,
then, yeah, and it finally happens in the final moments. And yeah, I just think it's sweet. I
it
wish they would have
is.
done more together, her and Christopher Walken. But,
Well, they did two more of these.
well, yes, but like,
Yes.
Anyway, I really, really appreciated watching this movie again. I do feel like it held up. And I think it's just a really sweet story that doesn't overcomplicate things, but still delves into mature themes. And I just wish that even like movies today that are in a little bit more of the family friendly genre like this allowed themselves to go deep and mature and take the time and go out on location, as this movie does too. Everything feels so authentic, and just sell a story with honesty, you know? I don't think
Yeah.
we have that much anymore.
No, we
So,
really don't. Yeah, there's so much contrivance, I think, in
mhm.
movies now, and everything's in front of a screen and
Yes.
yeah. Yeah.
Lord knows what the windstorm would have been like
Oh
if
boy.
this was filmed today.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, any other thoughts on this movie that we didn't talk about before we move on to the release?
I feel like we really covered a lot of it. I would
Yeah.
say one thing that I going back to Sarah bringing out Catherine's pictures and things. One of the things that I really like about that is that Sarah is not also just inserting her into this family and expecting to just replace mom. She's very much like Catherine. She even has a scene where I think she's talking to Maggie, where she says, I feel Catherine here.
Mm,
And like I feel that she's around. And
right.
she, instead of trying to chase that away, she's trying to preserve it and join this family that already exists instead of trying to change it. And I
Yeah.
really enjoy that.
Yeah. And like I said, also not trying to replace her. She is still
Hmm.
going to be herself.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, to get to the release of Sarah Plain and Tall, it aired on CBS on February 3rd, 1991, as part of the Hallmark Hall of Fame anthology of films. It was the most watched TV program of the week, viewed by 21.5 million households, not just viewers, but households. So you can imagine the number of actual viewers, families is probably double that at least.
Hmm.
So
Well, there
it
were
was very
three in
well.
my house watching it, so
There you go. You were
yeah.
part of that.
Hmm.
So, yeah, very well received, critically acclaimed, and this also led the movie to earn 9 Emmy nominations, including, list them off here, best dramedy or best drama slash comedy special and miniseries, basically the equivalent of best TV movie or limited series in today's Emmy terms.
Hmm.
Lead actor for Christopher Walken, lead actress for Glenn Close, best directing for Glenn Jordan, best writing, best editing, best costume design, best art direction, and best sound mixing. So it was an across the board contender. It only won for editing, but yeah, very, very well received overall. So, I mean, we talked all about the movie, but why do you think overall the film was as successful as it was? Not just with viewers, as you might kind of expect it to be, but also even critics and awards groups kind of loved it too.
That's a great question. I think some of what we're talking about, I think that it really they do such a lovely job of really immersing you in this world, and it feels like you're kind of transported to
Mm-hmm.
this farm in the middle of America, and especially thinking about TV movies at the time, I think this is one of the I sorry, right off the top of my head, I cannot think of anything else that was nominated that year. But I think
That's
that
fine.
it stood out in a lot of ways because on a production level, I think this is really particularly well done. It doesn't feel cheesy. The design of it, the costumes, all of that. It feels like a lived-in world. And I think that recognizing the artistic talent that went into crafting this, I think makes a lot of sense. And this is where I say I was so stunned when I when I looked at the nominations and realized it only won one Emmy because I remember watching the Emmys this year and I heard this title over and over and over again and I had seen it and my memory all these years later is that it won a bunch that night and
Hmm.
I'm so confused. I'm having like one of those was the Mandela
Mandela
effect.
effect.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm having that.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
funny. Yeah, I think people just really responded to the authenticity of the story, how it did kind of maybe transcend your classic TV movie of the week.
Hmm.
And I also just think the appeal of these movie stars with Glenn Close and Christopher Walken really kind of lended some credibility to it as well. And, it might not be reinventing the wheel or whatever by any means, but we were in a TV landscape, which sure we had something like Twin Peaks on the air around that time, but like that was a big exception to what else was on TV in terms of like pushing the envelope. So I
Yeah.
think it fit right in very well. And I also think just to continue to maybe speak generally to the times, I don't know if you can add on to this too, but I feel like there was that rise of like cable TV news and sensationalism going on, and it's like here we have this TV movie that was more about just like traditional values, which saying traditional values these days is kind of loaded, but like in this case, the idea of like this simple story about family that is told with heart, I think really appealed to people that were just looking for some comfort in their TV watching, and especially with these
Yeah.
great performances, it resonated.
Yeah, this also came out around the time that we were entering the first Gulf War.
Exactly.
And this was
Right.
all while the wall had come down in
Hmm.
Germany, and so like communism, the USSR was collapsing, and so all these big things are happening out in the world. And yeah, having these sweet, movies about simpler times and, good family values and things. I can see why that was big draw in
Yeah.
1991.
Yeah.
The
Just a
world was
theory.
changing.
Yes. Yes, indeed. I did just want to briefly touch on this Best Actress lineup, though. I don't know if you had any other memories of these other like TV movies and performances that Glenn was nominated with, but the others that were in her category were Barbara Hershey in Paris Trout, Suzanne Plachette in Leona Helmsley, The Queen of Mean, Lee Purcell in Long Road Home, and the winner, Lynn Whitfield, for the Josephine Baker story.
I have no memory of any of those.
Great.
Wow. Wow.
Well,
Sorry.
to be fair, you didn't have HBO at the time, so
I
you
did
wouldn't have watched
not.
the Josephine Baker story. That's where that was airing. But yeah, interesting little cross section of the stars of the time, and also like so many of these just like rip from the headline types of stories too. But yeah, I think Glenn not winning this probably makes sense, even sight unseen with Lynn Whitfield. I imagine just the showiness of that performance and like playing Josephine Baker, this biopic in a HBO movie. I could see where that could be a little bit showier than what Glenn is doing, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and one of the things that I do remember from that time period too is that HBO was kind of the new big flashy thing. And so a lot of times when they got into a category, they would win because it was something, because of that air of prestige. It was like
Right.
it, and I'm not saying that this is what Academy members were doing, but the sense being, on the outside watching this, it felt like they were saying, haha, we're too good for you. We know what's good and we have access to all these things that you don't. It really did feel like that.
Yeah.
So,
But
and
yeah, worth
snooty.
noting. Right, exactly. Worth noting that she was also a rare double nominee, Glenn, as an executive producer for that top TV movie category. So at this point, she is now at 3 Emmy nominations. In a few years, she will win her first Emmy for another TV movie, Serving in Silence, which I'm looking forward to discussing. But yeah, it's interesting how, like, right alongside her Oscar nominations and zero wins in the 80s, she's also in this period of being nominated at the Emmys and not winning either. Yeah, it's actually like the most successful award show for Glenn at this time is the Tonys, because she won for The Real Thing in 1984. She's going to win another one for Death and the Maiden in 1992. And of course, Sunset Boulevard in 1994. So,
Yeah, it's so weird because I feel like so many people like her. Everybody has worked with her. I
yep.
don't understand how she just can't seem to collect those Oscars. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Preaching to the choir, my
Yeah,
friend.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, let's get to our last segment where we are going to rate Glenn's performance on a very specific scale. Thinking about her performance and where this sits in her career, would you say that her performance as Sarah Wheaton, she is ready for her close up, which is one of her best performances? Is it low Glenergy, not really one of your faves, or somewhere in the middle, close but no cigar?
I really love what she's done with this role and the way that she
Hmm.
just made it hers. I love where this falls, looking at what she's doing before and after this. I just really like how she kind of sank into this role. I love the point that you made about that she was part of the development from the beginning of this character and really made it hers. And I'm gonna say she's ready for her close up.
Ah, yes. Excellent. I'm so relieved because I was at this point thinking, like, you know, as a character type, this vibe is not my favorite necessarily always for Glenn. I do love those villain roles. But for me, this is an easy ready for her close up moment. I
Yeah.
totally agree. I think you can feel her love for this character, and she just imbues it with so much warmth and pathos. And Yeah, I find that she helps to elevate what could have felt like a standard TV movie of the week, and like she takes it seriously. And I love that she always takes her roles seriously, even if it's the goofiest role imaginable, as we would see later on in her career.
Yes.
So, yes. Well done, Glenn. A great left turn for her. I think also, actually, I wanted to bring this up at the end here. It's a great left turn because it does show her range, and she refused to be kind of typecast into those villainous roles after
Mm.
Fatal Attraction and Dangerous Liaisons.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
just really career smarts she had a lot of at the time. So
She did. She still
yeah,
does. She still does.
she still does.
I mean,
Let's
she
be
still
honest.
now she makes some questionable choices, but she still brings
Sh-
it.
She's just having fun,
Yeah.
you know? Anyway, Karen, thank you so much for joining me. This was lovely. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This has been great.
Yeah. Well, where can people find more of you if you wish for them to find you on the internet?
I would love for them to find me on the internet. Uh,
Fair.
for my written work, I'm at Awards Watch, and I have the podcasts Citizen Dame and The Watch and Talk. And you can find me on social media. Particularly, I'm busiest on Letterboxd, but also Instagram and Blue Sky at Karen M. Peterson.
Go follow Karen if you haven't already.
Oh, thank you.
So thank you all so much for listening. You could find me at Kevin_Jacobsen on Twitter and Instagram. I think on Letterboxd too, which I never say on the show, but you reminded me of that. So there you go. Find me on Letterboxd. And just Kevin Jacobsen, no underscore on Blue Sky. Listen to my other Oscar-themed podcast, And the Runner-Up Is, for coverage of every single Best Actress race, including some with Karen herself here on 1960 and 2017. Two very, very different years.
Yes.
Wildly different. But Karen has the range. Anyway, that's And the Runner-Up Is on all platforms. And to keep up with the world according to Glenn on social, follow The Glenn Pod and rate, review, and follow The World According to Glenn on all podcast platforms. And with that, I'll bid you all adieu.